You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, the illustrious Joe Hogan.
Man, I don't know about that illustrious part. A lot of people met me in Epcot last week, and I'm sure my reputation suffered as a result now that they know the truth about what a mess of a human being I am in
Oh,
person. So
I highly doubt that. That's awesome. You guys had a good show down at Epcot
it
last week.
was one of the highlights of my career, honestly. Just getting to meet some very different crowd than a convention.
Mhm.
Um, A lot of tipsy people, a lot of friendly tipsy people walking around Epcot. Very different dynamic, but really, really amazing, really, really humbling. Both Tina and I were signing our prints, and a lot of people were kind enough to not only purchase prints there, but I was surprised at how many people brought prints that they had already ordered from Acme just to meet me and have me sign them, and it was like, "Really? You carried this all the way through an entire Disney what are you gonna do with this print now? Like,
Yeah.
you can't go on any rides with this now." Um,
Wow.
but, like, that was a very humbling experience that people came specifically just to have me sign the print. Like, "Yeah, no, I'm going home now. We're local." It's like, "What? You came all this" it was, like, the strangest, coolest thing. Um, Seriously, huge shout out and thank you to anybody who uh, did make the trip and said hello and chatted with me and helped those very warm afternoons go by very, very quickly.
That is awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it
I'm
was
glad that you
wonderful.
guys had a great time and it was worthwhile. You know, sometimes you never know, right? With the art stuff, it's like I'm gonna go to this thing and maybe it'll be good and I'll sell some stuff and I'll meet some people and whatever. And then you get to a thing and it's like, oh, there's other stuff and nobody cares about this, right?
Yeah, I was definitely not sure what to expect. This was the first time we were invited. I mean, Acme in
Mhm.
general treated us so well. They always treat us well, but like this was basically an excuse to just go hang out in Disney World for what 4 or 5 days. Shout out to Ryan and Michael Whitney at the in the Acme area. You guys are amazing. Lauren took amazing care of Tina. Yeah, we were very fortunate, and I believe we are kind of unofficially but sort of officially invited to go back next year already. So we
Awesome.
are we are really pumped and looking forward to that. But
That's fantastic. I
we
that's
got to
great.
ride Guardians too. I know that's not on topic, but like the one of a friend of ours who's in analytics at
Yeah.
Disney was able to get us on Guardians without having to do the lottery stuff. It was really amazing. So shout
Oh,
out to
nice.
Brandon also.
That's fantastic. Awesome. Um, yeah. Well, back to podcast stuff. Because that's awesome and exciting. But we got a ton of stuff going on with Thunderquack and with Force Perspectives
Whew.
this month. For those of you who are listening on the regular podcast feed, it is February, and in the month of February, we are doing our Thunderquack pledge drive. So if you head over to patreon.com/thunderquack and you pledge over there, not only will you get all of the sort of regular Thunderquack bonuses and that sort of thing that are just our standard Patreon that we've been doing for a while, which includes early access to this podcast, a few days early. It's a few days early, but you'll also get access to all of our bonus content that we're doing this month. So for the month of February, sort of throughout it, we're gonna have a bunch of bonus episodes drop. I that are Patreon exclusive. You'll only be able to get them there. with some really fun topics and that sort of thing. Let's see. I mean, this is the thing, is that this episode technically drops before the launch of the pledge drive, so the bonus episodes won't be up yet, but I'll tell you that like the Monday, Tuesday of the following week, so like the first full week of February, um actually, it's Groundhog Day, by the way. If you're listening to this on release day, regular release day. But that like the following weekend, or after the following weekend, we'll have Perfect 10, Star Wars: A New Hope up on the exclusive Patreon feed for you, as well as later that week we should have the Thunderquack podcast exclusive with Joe and I, where we're gonna rank all 151 original Pokemon.
This is gonna be a disaster.
Yeah, from worst to best. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think that we'll get much debate. I have not discussed this with Joe, but I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty sure the bottom of the list is Mr. Mime. I think we can just firmly put him at 151, and
Safe
then
safe bet.
safe bet.
I something is telling me there is someone worse than him, but I
You
feel
think
pretty
so?
comfortable with
Yeah.
our prediction on that one.
Oh, you know what? Jinx might be 151.
Yeah, Jinx kind of
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah.
Jinx is pretty lame.
So there's a little preview of you for you of what we're gonna do over there on the Thunderquack podcast for that exclusive Patreon episode. But all of our active shows, so that's Force Perspectives, Rebel Cells, The Saga Continues, Wampa's Lair. Those are all the Star Wars shows that will have exclusive content up on the Patreon in the month of February. Now, like, it'll be up there, and it'll be up there in perpetuity, right? So it's not like you got, like, if you don't join in February, you're not going to get it. But we're just kind of tracking it in February. That's the
Mm.
idea, is that we want to kind of have this push in February. So all of this content's going to come out over the course of the 29 days of February this year. It's a leap year. And then we've got a goal that we're tracking. So by the end of the month, if we can reach certain milestones, we will we'll have more exclusive content coming. So I one of those things is that if I think it's $300, if we hit that, then I will do another round of bonus episodes for everybody. But if we can hit Joe, I haven't talked to you about this yet, but I did. I mean, I have, because I sent you the thing and you had the chance to look at it, but I don't know if you looked closely enough. If we hit $350, we're gonna start doing the podcasts as video as well, because
Oh, cool.
we've got Zencaster and we can record, but it's a lot of extra effort to do that editing, to get it out on video, and not just on audio. But if we can hit $350 a month on Patreon, from supporters, then yeah, we'll turn our cameras on, and you'll be able to get video.
I don't know
content.
anyone who wants to see my face, but yours maybe. But
Yeah. I just know that, like, some people have asked over the years for video content, like for more video stuff, right? So that's one of those things. It's just, it requires a lot of time, but that's happening right now. There'll be details on social media, as well as there'll actually be a full episode on that Monday, which is what is that, like the 5th? Let's see. Yeah, on the 5th, there'll be an episode on this feed, I where I'll break down everything. I'll go through the whole thing. It'll actually be on all of the podcast feeds. So if you subscribe to more than one Thunderquack podcast, you're going to get inundated with me, with like a 20-minute episode of me talking
Oh,
about the
boy.
pledge drive. But you only have to listen to it on one of them, and you can delete it on the rest of the feeds. But yeah, I'll have all of the details, and we'll have everything worked out, and I'll give you guys the full breakdown of everything and where we're at, and where we want to get to by the end of February. But that's happening right now. The other thing that's happening in February, this episode's a little bit early for it, but because we're on the 4-week schedule, this kind of counts as our Star Wars podcast day episode. So February 7th, which is that Wednesday, I following the launch of our pledge drive, will be participating in Star Wars Podcast Day. We will have this episode as part of that, and we've got an episode of Rebel Cells coming out this week as well that will be a part of that, because obviously the Bad Batch trailer dropped, and all of the details and stuff for season 3 are out. So Joe and Kyle and I are going to get together later today, actually this evening.
This doesn't sound like something we would do. I don't know, man.
Yeah. And we're gonna talk about Bad Batch season 3 and everything that we're looking forward to, and break down the trailer and everything. So so that actually is probably also in your podcast feed right now as well. So go check that out. But we're part of Star Wars Podcast Day. Both of the podcasts are, as well as the Wampa's Lair is also participating this year. And like over 100 Star Wars podcasts are participating in Star Wars Podcast Day. So so definitely go check out. They've got an Instagram at Star Wars Pod Day. Go follow that, and you'll be able to get all of the details of all of the shows. I'm not going to run them all down here, but I mean, like, there's some great shows, some shows, friends of this show as well. Let me see. Let's bring up a couple of them. We got it's the Yubcast, right? Is another animated focused Star Wars podcast. That's that I they're awesome on social media. We interact with them all the time. Let's see, Into a Larger World is a great podcast as well, that's going to be participating in this. I mean, like, there's so many, dude. This list is crazy. Like I said, the Wampa's Lair. Oh man, I'm looking through the list, and I'm looking for like our friends to call them out specifically. Rebel Base Card is another one of those ones that we interact with on social media a lot. So they're great. Yeah, man, there's a ton. I mean, there's so many Star Wars podcasts now. It's so funny. When I started almost 16 years ago, 15 and a half years ago, there's just a handful, like less than 100, it felt like. And now it feels like there's 100 Star Wars podcasts, new Star Wars podcasts, like every day. But yeah, this is a really cool thing to be a part of, to participate with, just to help promote all of these. You know what it is? It's like there are so many Star Wars podcasts, and I think you guys know the big ones, right? But this is a really good opportunity to find some more, like, sort of off the beaten path Star Wars podcasts that you get maybe some more interesting takes on Star Wars than just sort of the some of the more standard stuff in the bigger shows. What happens is the bigger shows have to play it safe, because they don't want to upset their audiences and stuff. Not that all of them do, but I find that, like, you get some fun, like, niche takes on things from some of these smaller podcasts, as well as stuff that's like more focused in the way that, like, we are with Rebel Cells, right? Stuff that's like very dedicated specifically to animation, or
Right.
to the books or whatever. So this is a really, really great opportunity to discover some of those new shows. And there's a lot of really great people participating this year. So yeah, go check that out. Star Wars Pod Day on Instagram, and February 7th is the official Star Wars Podcast Day. So make sure that you share our podcasts, and let people know about your favorites during that. Let's see. Is there anything else that I want to talk about before we get into it? I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, we got Rebel Cells coming back. We'll be back, like, in full force later in the month of February.
Real soon. A lot sooner than I expected.
Yeah, with our episode recaps. And yeah, I mean, I think it's about
less than a month,
eight or 9 weeks of that. I don't remember how many. So there's a couple of, like, double episodes, right? So
right, the first week is 3 of them. The mid-season ish is 2.
Yeah,
and then I think that's a
It's a very similar breakdown to season 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks. It brings us all the way to May 1st. So that takes us
right.
all the way to basically to May the 4th. I'll tell you this right now. I'll bet you anything they announce a new animated series. But
I really hope so.
yeah,
I don't want this
whatever's
to be
coming
it.
next, and the reason, which will, once we know, it'll be really clear why Bad Batch ended in season 3. But I also
Mhm.
think this is great. I think I'm excited about it because I think that it'll be nice to have like a bookend on it, right? It won't go on too long and it won't meander, but to have like that as sort of like a final story.
I
Um,
gotta tell you though, not to bring it back to
yeah.
Epcot, but like I most of my prints are focused on Clone Wars and Bad Batch and
Hmm.
all the animated stuff. And kind of the small talk question I was asking everybody is, "Oh, so did you see the Bad Batch trailer?" It had dropped the day before I started signing,
Yeah.
and everybody everybody commented saying, "I don't want it to end." And we all kind of settle on the same thing. Well, yeah, like we don't want it to end, but there's probably a very clear reason it's going to
Yeah.
end, and chances are, like with this focused, definitive, ending, there's a reason for it, right? Like we're gonna get, I think, a very impactful story with it
Yeah. Yeah.
having this like we're choosing to end it now. There's no way it's just because like they're just bored of doing Bad Batch. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, I think that the end of the season will set up some of these characters to show up in other things in the future. And
I
I think
hope
that
so.
actually might be one of the reasons why they are ending it is to allow for some of these characters to crop up in other things, because I think it's hard to tell stories further into the future when you've got sort of the past still playing out. So I think it's
Hmm.
easier to like kind of wrap it up, say that's the end of that story, and
Right.
obviously stuff in between that can and will happen. But yeah, there are a few characters that I am expecting to show up in some future things, and some of them are Bad Batch characters. So um, yeah, I mean, we'll get into that. We'll get into that on Rebel Cells. We'll get into the details of it, get into the weeds of it. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I get there's just a little bit of news that I'll just really quickly touch on. We won't get into any of the like debating of it or anything, but I just wanted to note that Daisy Ridley's been doing a lot of press lately
Hmm.
for her movie. Sometimes I Think About Dying, which is I think premiering in the States like really soon, sometime in the next couple of weeks, if it hasn't already. So she's been doing a ton of press, and people keep asking her about Star Wars, obviously, because she is the only person confirmed coming back for the new Jedi Order movie, right? So she's been doing a lot of talking. And one of the things that I would like to just highlight and get excited about is that she has said that she hasn't. I don't think she's read the script, because I think they're still kind of in the process of finishing it up, but that like the story is pretty nailed down. And to quote her, it's cool as shit. Which like is just great. And she kind of went on to say that if the story wasn't there, she wouldn't be coming back. She would have been like, yeah, come talk to me in another 5 years. um and I like, this is the thing, is that you look at the choices that she's made with her career outside of Star Wars. And I think that she's actually gotten really shrewd about that sort of thing. I think that
Mm.
that the Tom Holland one that she did, I can't remember what it was called, but
I don't think anyone remembers what
yeah,
it was
it
called.
was like, I think like she looks at that as like, ooh, yeah, no, misstep, right? That it just wasn't there. It wasn't solid. But I think that she's looking at the creative team that's behind this new movie, and the story that they want to tell, and she's down because it's worthwhile. So that look, I have absolute faith in her, and when she says that, I believe it. it doesn't necessarily mean the movie that is going to be as good as the story, right? Because sometimes, and like if you broke down the story of Rise of Skywalker, I think that people would be like, oh cool, and then you get into the details of the Rise of Skywalker and you're like, not so much, right? So films are collaborative and they evolve over the course of production, so there's a lot that can happen between now and release. But it does give me faith. It does give me a lot of faith that she's like excited about it. I don't think that this is about the money as much as the reports are saying she's being paid over $12 million for it. It's like, well, yeah,
Oh
she
my
should
god.
be. It's gonna make Disney a lot of money, so they should pay her a
Mhm.
lot of money. That's how that works. But yeah, yeah, and then there's, because she's in the press and because people are talking about this movie, they continue to just be the worst on the internet about these things. Another thing happened is she made a comment about like J.J. Abrams said to her, when they signed her for The Force Awakens, like this is gonna be a big deal. Like this is a basically, I'm paraphrasing, this is a religion to a lot of people, and it's gonna be intense. And then later in the interview, she mentions that like by the time that they were filming The Last Jedi, she had severe anxiety and like had holes in her stomach that had developed and stuff.
Mhm.
um and I mean that all sort of is around the same time of like her leaving social media and all of that sort of thing, right? And people, I don't quite understand. I mean, I kind of understand, but I don't fully understand people going after J.J. Abrams for that. Like, it's like, why would you say that to her? It's like, had he said that or not said that, I'm pretty sure the result would have been the same. Like the fact that she was a woman taking the lead in Star Wars was going to create the backlash that it did, and the nonsense that it did, um, which I think is going to be difficult for anybody to handle, no matter how prepared or unprepared they are.
Sure.
So I look at it and it's like, I like look, there's a lot of stuff that we can get mad at JJ for, over the course of the production of those films. I don't think that this is one of those things, but people tend to want to like scapegoat and villainize and that sort of thing, and it's like I think in this instance it's pretty unfair to like put that on J.J. Abrams. I don't think that J.J. Abrams telling her that it was going to be a circus gave her more anxiety than the circus itself. Like if
Mhm.
it did, it doesn't even blip. It doesn't even register compared to the nonsense that went on, right? So I understand. I feel where some of the fans are coming from, because I think that it's like a protective place of their, like, it's upsetting for them that this is the way that things go, but like it's Star Wars, and unfortunately this is the way that it is. And I don't know. These people don't represent the fandom as a whole, but they definitely do make more noise than the rest of the fandom, which is unfortunate. They're very, very loud, uh, and therefore cause a great deal of difficulty for the actors. I also think that there's a lot of bad faith actors in there that really don't give a crap about Star Wars, and they're just jumping on whatever, especially now. I think on the last episode we talked a little bit about that, about sort of the the people going after the director of the new Ray movie, and all of that. And it's like there's a lot of people in that it's like they've just been given conservative talking points, and a target, and they're just going after, and they really, like, they don't care that much about Star Wars. um but then it ends up making the conversation seem like the Star Wars fandom is once again blah 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 blah. And it's like, I don't know about you, but the people that I'm talking to in the Star Wars fandom are not these people, right? So yeah, I don't know, it's difficult because it's not representative of I think who we are as a larger group. And I think that always ends up coming out at Celebration, right? Like these stars go to Celebration. Hayden Christensen's such a great example. He goes to Star Wars Celebration and discovers that, like, oh, actually, like, this character and this performance is beloved. Like, everybody tells me that I'm the worst. And it's like, yeah, not us. Not us. We love Anakin Skywalker. Um And so they get to see what the fandom actually is, and without the obnoxiousness of the internet, right? Where people get to hide behind things. But anyways, that's that's all just kind of going on. People were like going crazy for a second of like the idea of a Star Wars what if, because Marvel What If finished its season, and then there were rumors that they're working on a Star Wars What If animated series, which that might be what they announce on May the 4th.
I would
I
enjoy
don't
that. I
I
think that'd
don't
be super
necessarily
cool.
think that that's what it's going to be. I think we're going to get some connective tissue either from the OT to the sequel trilogy, or something from the sequel trilogy to the new Jedi Order stuff. That's my bet. That would be I think the best strategic move for Lucasfilm and for the animated division right now. Um, but if they do make a Star Wars What If, first of all, it won't be called Star Wars What If. It will most likely be called Star Wars Infinities, unless there's a problem with using that title.
Mm,
With like, I don't know if Dark Horse maybe owns it because it's something that they published. I doubt it, because the licensing agreement probably doesn't work that way, right? But
mm.
I would imagine you would call it Star Wars Infinities, because that already exists as a concept. Um, but yeah,
I'm
I'd be down for it.
I'm also wondering if Tales of the Jedi is going to continue to be something that's
Mm,
very short form. Like,
yeah,
I'm wondering if, they did that first one and it was obviously pretty popular, people really enjoyed it. Is season 2 going to be longer now because of that, or are they just happy kind of making those
yeah,
bite-sized little seasons and episodes? Um,
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think they're going to use Tales of the Jedi as a way to uh, generate buzz around certain characters, right?
mhm.
Um, they did it with Ahsoka. I sort of just to prep a bunch of people. It's like, oh well, you don't have to go watch all of the Clone Wars. You can just watch these episodes of Tales of the Jedi, and in like half an hour, you can like be caught up
Yeah.
on Ahsoka Tano as a character and understand who she is, and where she's at, enough to watch Ahsoka, right?
Mm.
And there's a certain character that maybe is coming back in Bad Batch that maybe will show up in the Ahsoka series, or the Mandalorian movie, or
I
like
I can't wait
whatever.
to talk about that. I have
Yeah,
so many questions. I'm so
we're gonna get
excited.
into it,
Yeah.
but we're almost at half an hour now, so we gotta like cut off this, and we gotta get into our topic, because we got so much to talk about with this topic. And this is more important. What we're gonna talk about for the rest of this episode is so much more important than anything else that we just talked. I'm being a little bit facetious, but um yeah, I think that Tales of the Jedi is going to be used as like a marketing tool. I think that's its primary thing. It'll probably be like
I'm
they did
okay
with the
with that.
last one.
As long as it's good. The
Yeah,
first season was awesome. As long as
yeah,
it's good, I don't
yeah.
care.
And I think it's just Dave's way of going like, there's some stuff I need to tell here. There's some gaps I need to fill in for these various things for whatever reason. So I'm gonna just do this and this and this, because that was the genesis of that show, right? Was him going
Mm,
like, I have stuff that needs to be told about Ahsoka in advance of the Ahsoka show. No doubt, stuff that he had originally probably put into those scripts,
mhm.
and then like had to go like, well, this doesn't fit in here anymore because we got to stay focused on these things, and so that's what became Tales of the Jedi. I guarantee it. And then it was like, oh,
Mm.
we'll also do Dooku. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that we get a new season of Tales of the Jedi sooner rather than later. May the 4th would be really rad if they just dropped it then. They were like, here's 4 episodes about Asajj and 4 episodes about Kanan, and 4 episodes. I want them to
You
do
know,
4 characters this time, but
you know the one that I kept hearing because this was another kind of small talk question I was asking
yeah,
everybody. Multiple people said Balin.
yeah, yeah. I could see it. I could see it. And
That'd
you
be
know what?
awesome.
There's every possibility that if that is the case, that they've already recorded all of the dialogue. I mean,
Oh, I hope so.
if it were to drop, because we know we're getting more Tales of the Jedi this year. So if that, like, when that drops, if there is Balin stuff or even Shin stuff, right, and which will involve Balin, then the likelihood of them having already recorded everything with Ray Stevenson
Yeah,
is like
that
99%,
that would
because
be
of the lead time,
rad. That
right?
would be awesome.
So it'd be really cool to get more with him. with Ray Stevenson in advance of season 2 of Ahsoka. I think that's likely. I think that's actually probably a pretty good guess.
Cool.
Cool. Well, let's get into our topic. Let's jump into this. We're gonna run down each of our lists, our top 5 expanded universe characters. Now, listen, it's our top 5 expanded universe characters today, right?
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
this list shifts, and I mean, I'm sure for you that there are a few that are always on there,
Yes.
and
Yes.
but there's a lot of characters in the EU. Most of them suck, but there are some really really cool ones. So we're gonna get into that. I do you want to start off, or do you want me to start off?
I'm happy with either, man. I'm good to go.
All right, let me start off. Let
Yeah,
me
do it.
let me get this one out of the way right up top.
Set the tone.
Set the tone. I'm gonna go with my first one that we're gonna talk about. It'll be brief. It'll be very brief because
Okay.
most of it is aesthetic, and that is Jaxxon.
Okay.
Uh, Jaxxon introduced in the comic books, in the Marvel comic books in the 70s and early 80s. He's a bounty hunter. He's their species is Leppy, right? He's a giant green rabbit in a spacesuit, an orange spacesuit. Now, there's a very specific reason why I like this character. Actually, there are two. The first one is that a lot of people don't like this character. So, like most Glupshitos, that's why I like him, because he's an underdog. The other reason that I like him so much is because he was ripped off by another character in the early '90s by the name of Bucky O'Hare, and I loved Bucky O'Hare, the cartoon show, which also featured an anthropomorphic rabbit, a green rabbit I mean, like, it was a red. He's like in a red space suit that's also kind of a little bit like he's kind of got like a Captain Crunch,
Yeah.
sort of vibe
Yeah.
to it as well. But yeah, that character very very obviously ripped off of Jaxxon. Um, but all of that said, I actually do find Jaxxon to be a really interesting character when he's used well, which is sort of few and far between. But I mean, the comics those comics are kind of what they are, right? They're kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. But Jaxxon is an interesting character to me because he has this look, and yet he's kind of antithetical to it because he's kind of a jerk, right? Like, he's got a little bit of Han Solo in him. There's a little bit of like that sort of rogue scoundrel thing, but he's not necessarily a good person, right? Like, he's
Mm.
not like he's very much like out for himself. So um but like most Star Wars stories, ultimately he falls on the side of our heroes more often than not. So I don't know. I think one of my things with Jaxxon is that there's a lot of potential there with that character. I would love to see him show up in something, and get the opportunity to really like flesh that out, right? Um, one of the hardest parts of this is that like a bunch of my favorites were actually like have been canonized. Um,
You know,
Actually,
I
you know
had the
what?
same thought.
I have to take one of these. Well, maybe not. We can kind of leave them because they haven't really been fleshed out that much. But I do have two characters on this list. I'm just realizing now that are actually like canonized. They're not expanded universe characters
Mm.
anymore. I mean, we can talk about like their expanded universe versions compared to what we've seen so far, but because like Kersantin would have been one of those characters
Mm.
before, because I really like Kersantin, but he's like now officially like a real Star Wars character, not just an expanded universe. I don't know. I guess the comics are kind of the Disney comics are considered canon as well, right? But
Until they're not.
until they're not,
I mean,
exactly.
that's basically always the way it's been.
Yeah.
But
I might actually switch out one of these characters. Thinking
okay.
about that, I might switch one up,
Okay.
but Yeah. So I would like to see, I bring that up. I bring up Chrysanthemum specifically because I would like to see Jaxxon get that treatment. I would like to see him show up as a supporting character in one of these other shows, and for him to have an opportunity to be fleshed out, and for the wider audience to get to see him. Because I do think that he fits an archetype really well that we like to play with Han. Uh, um, I oh my god, his name just fell out of my head. Cobb, Cobb Vanth, right? Like has like
Mm,
that sort of like scoundrel with a heart of gold sort of vibe to him, right? Even Mando a little bit. I don't know. Mando's kind of a like Din is a slightly different thing, um, but yeah, I would love to see him show up at some point in the future. Uh, in live action because I just think that it would be it would be a really cool opportunity for them to do a practical effect character in the same way that they did with Chrysanthemum, so we can have like something physical and real that we can see, and
mhm.
it's a species that is not established in live action, so there's a lot of room there. But um yeah, that's it. That's Jaxxon. That's all I have to say about that character. Yeah, like I said, it's mostly aesthetic. I just like a giant green rabbit in a spacesuit. I think it's fun.
I
Um,
think it's a matter of time before we see him in a background somewhere. You know what I
sure.
mean? Like it's almost inevitable because he's such like a perfect character to have like, in your if we were in Book of Boba Fett, that little gambling cantina, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
if he was sitting there, he would not have been out of place.
No.
And he does have that like infamous little reputation, and he has his dedicated following, and
Yeah,
I could see that being a little piece of fan service that that we could get in the future. I would not
totally.
be surprised.
What's your first one?
Okay, I think I'm gonna go with since we're talking that archetype, I'll do Dash Rendar, smuggler, heart of gold. Um Really conceived just to be the Han Solo substitute for Shadows of the Empire because
Yeah.
you needed that kind of character for the video game and the story that they wanted to tell. But I really like a lot of the differences that we kind of see in Dash versus Han, where Han really is that cocky and really does believe in himself, but Dash is a lot more. Um, he puts up a macho front, but he's really insecure. He really is an amazing pilot. He really is an amazing shot, but there's one scene where he believes he misses a shot, and as a result, a missile explodes, and a bunch of Bothans, I think it's Bothans, die during that scene in Shadows of the Empire, and he's just kind of like, I can't believe it. I never miss. I never miss that shot, and it's really all of his insecurities creeping up on him. And I like that little bit of uh, you know character flaws, like his hubris really uh, being tested and almost shaking some sense to him, but really put him in this state of shell shock where he's almost killed as a result. And um, they play on that even more. There's a novel that takes place before Shadows of the Empire that shows more of the rivalry between him and Han, and I think Lando a little bit, maybe,
Hmm.
if I'm remembering correctly. But seeing how he's differentiated from Han a little bit, I always like the character design, as silly and 90s as it is, right? Like the Rob Liefeld. Am I thinking of the right person? With just patches and shoulder pads and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that stuff. It really was like Dash's design really was a product of 90s cool guy comic heroes. Um, but there's more to him. There's more to him, and I really love Shadows of the Empire. So he's the protagonist in the video game. So I just really associate it with discovering Star Wars beyond the movies for me, because Shadows of the Empire was the first real expanded universe thing that I familiarized myself with after seeing the films. And it was very connective, considering how big that marketing campaign was. It was the movie campaign without the movie. And it's just, Kyle, is the more you kind of get to know him, and there isn't that much source material for him. But like the more you get to know him, the more he isn't just that Han Solo substitute character. And
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I always really gravitated towards him. I don't prefer him over Han Solo, but I always liked that he was there. Um, and I liked that there were more layers to him than just like the cocky smuggler.
Yeah.
And I like
I
that at the heart of it, there is a real friendship between him and Han Solo.
yeah. I the dash thing is always is interesting to me. It's like Jar Jar and the Ewoks, right? It wasn't until I got online
Sure.
that I learned that like everybody else hates these things.
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, I was like, I played Chad as the Empire. I'm like, Dash Rendar seems pretty cool to me. I don't know. Like he's he's Han Solo diet, right? Like it's it's we have Han Solo at home, right? But also like you're saying, like he is also his own character,
Mhm.
right? Um, there's another one that I would love to see crop up in something and get an opportunity to sort of like get the post Disney makeover, the post Disney glow up that
Yeah.
a few characters
Yeah.
have gotten in the
He
last few years.
he is mentioned in new canon. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned in War of the Bounty Hunters or something.
Okay,
So like he's running around,
yeah,
but we
that's
have
good.
not seen him yet.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, Shadows of the Empire is like firmly Legends. It's been
Mhm.
completely replaced by a bunch of really bad comic books. Um,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
that like to me that is the most upsetting thing about sort of like the way that Disney has handled the comics and I guess more Marvel, but like it's sort of the Lucasfilm strategy with the comics and the time period between A New Hope and Empire and between Empire and Jedi is that like they've really given those time periods to the comic books, um, and the comic books are not like no one's keeping an eye on that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It feels a little
Yeah.
bit it's a little bit Wild West. And and so there's some really good stuff in the comics, but there's also been a much larger amount of stuff I feel like that has just been shoveled out because they just there's so many titles and it's Marvel, so that's what Marvel does, right? And I like it really makes me yearn for the days of Dark Horse where
Dude, Dark Horse is back. Dark Horse is doing some things. Like, I don't know if you're reading hyperspace stories. It's basically one Star Wars tale story every issue.
oh
Like,
nice.
you never know what you're going to get. What
Yeah.
arcs you're going to get. And same thing with IDW. IDW is also doing some Star Wars stuff. They're more for like younger kids, but
Yeah,
like,
with the adventures
same
stuff. Yeah.
thing. Like, they're
Yeah.
awesome. It's
Yeah.
really the Marvel stuff that's falling short for me.
It is. It is. Yeah. Like they just and they're just trying to cram too much story into those time periods.
Mhm.
Um and I will always say this, like if something monumental happened between A New Hope and Empire, there would have been a movie. If something big happened between Empire and Jedi, there would have been a movie,
Mhm.
right? Like that, like there would have been, and I don't mean that like oh, like they would have made a movie of like. I'm what I mean is like the story of the original trilogy is those three pieces because that's when the story occurs. And
Mhm.
if there's time in between, those stories that happen in between need to be much smaller. But like War of the Bounty Hunters is bigger than anything that happens in
Yeah.
Empire or
It's
Jedi.
it's
It's
crazy.
massive, involving like 30 characters and ridiculous things. And Kira comes back, and Boba Fett does all of this stuff, and like it's the thing about Shadows of the Empire that I thought was so great about it is that it really managed to sort of like perfectly fit a narrative space in between two movies,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like some stuff happened and like because obviously we Luke is in a very different place in Return of the Jedi than he is in Empire Strikes Back. So
Right.
obviously some stuff occurred. So there is room to tell a story there. But like there wasn't another Death Star, right? Like there
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
another like the clones didn't all come back and like it's just like the scale of these stories and the scale of what Luke experiences specifically in between the three original trilogy films in the comics, I think it's just like I've talked about this a million times. Within the first two arcs of the Marvel Star Wars comic, Luke Skywalker fights Darth Vader on the back of a speeder bike with his lightsaber, right? And gets away somehow. And then he fights Boba Fett and wins and gets away somehow. Luke Skywalker, that whiny, obnoxious twerp in Empire Strikes Back, right? Like, I'm like, you guys know, I love Luke. But like the character that we see at the beginning of Empire, certainly the character that we see at the end of A New Hope, is not capable of these things. He just isn't. Like, based on what we see on screen, he isn't. And as we talked about in our last episode, the fight between him and Vader on Bespin, the only reason that he survives is because Vader chooses to allow him to survive, right? Like, he's toying with him. It's a game for Vader. So the idea that all of this other stuff could happen, it just like, it drives me nuts. Anyways, that's a whole tangent. You want me to jump into my next one?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna go with two characters that are sort of one character, from my favorite part of expanded universe content, which is the Han Solo adventures, and that's Bollux and Blue Max. So Bollux and Blue Max are a droid pair. Blue Max is really just like, actually, so some of this makes it into Solo, which is
I'm
one
so,
of the reasons
what
why I
what
love
what
Solo so much.
what's the first one's name again?
Bollux, Bollux.
Literally
Yep,
bollocks. Okay.
yep, yep.
Just making sure I heard it right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Blue Max. So Bollux is a protocol droid. Bollux is the less interesting of the two, and he's really just sort of like an accessory to Blue Max. But the concept of Blue Max made it into Solo when in the sequence when L3 gets hooked into the Millennium Falcon. So they take L3's processor, right, like L3's brain, out of the droid and hook it directly into the ship, and then that obviously ends up influencing like sort of retconning the scene in Empire when 3PO's like, I don't know where your ship learned to speak, but it has a most peculiar dialect. Now we know that, like, oh, that's L3. Like, 3PO was having a conversation with L3, and 3PO, being the dutiful droid, if he was confronted with L3 of, like, telling him to throw off his shackles and fight against the organics, that would be his reaction. It's like, I don't know where this person came from, but they are a little intense. But that concept of a droid sort of like being like the casing, the body, the, like, whatever sort of model it is actually like sort of secondary to the processor. So Blue Max is essentially just a droid brain with no body, and so Blue Max goes inside of Bollux, into his chest cavity. And then Bollux, who really doesn't have much personality or agency himself, is then sort of like, they sort of form a complete character, which is why I am including them as sort of one guy.
Hmm.
But they're the comic relief in the Han Solo adventures stories. And I mean, like, Blue Max is also a plot device at one point, but which is how he kind of comes into the story. But again, very, very similar stuff to L3, of like, L3 is, really what, like, charts the course through Kessel to get them out, and Han takes all the credit. But Blue Max is very similar. I can't remember. It's been so long since
How
I've read the books. I think Blue Max has the location of Star's End, and that's sort of like the purpose of that character.
how
Either that, or is like able to decipher it. I don't remember.
how far into Sea of Stars did you get again?
Oh, the underwater
Okay.
village. Yeah. Why
Because
is
I'm
there?
there
There's
there is something coming to mind that is very similar to what you're
Oh, nice.
describe. It's kind of messing with me a little bit.
I know I need to get back into that game, but I jumped on the Pokemon train
Okay.
I got to finish Pokemon.
Okay.
And then I got
Yeah.
sidetracked from Pokemon as I've been playing through Power Wash Simulator. So, uh,
Yo,
uh,
Tina loves that game.
whole other thing. Oh, Power
That and
Wash
House
Simulator
Flipper.
is so like, oh, it's just relaxing. It's just zen. Um, so yeah, Bollocks and Blue Max are I love those books, the Brian Daly Star Han Solo stuff. Like the way he wrote those stories is how I wish that EU was handled in general. It's not as serious. They are pulp adventures. They are very much the tone of like what I like in Star Wars. And the movie Solo takes so much
Mm.
inspiration. Not just like I said, like the Blue Max thing and L3. Like there's a direct correlation there, and I'm sure if you talk to John Kasdan, that he would tell you that was an inspiration for that character,
Mm.
and for that plot line. But like just like in terms of tone and stuff, which is why I love Solo so much, because it is just a straight up pulp adventure. The stakes are very low. They're high for our characters, but they're low for the galaxy, which I think is where the EU sort of should sit most of the time. I do also think that, you get New Jedi Order and it's like, okay, we're going to tell this epic story. But then within that, it works for me the best when the stakes are lower, for the galaxy but high for the character, until I get to one of my other characters, which I'll talk about, which is New Jedi Order related. But but yeah, Bollocks and Blue Max, they're great.
Cool.
Those
Yeah.
books are so fantastic, and they're such a quick read. You can read all three of them basically in the span of one modern Star Wars novel, because they're
Yeah.
about
I've
250
never read
pages
them,
each.
and I had never even heard of those characters before now. So.
They're really good. They're full of tons of great characters. If you read them, you will then watch Solo and be like, oh, Kira's not a new character. Kira is directly taken from these three characters. Like
Mm.
there's inspiration. One of those characters is Leia, by the way. But I not that Leia shows up in the Brian Daly stuff, but like when I look at Kira, it's like there are a couple of characters from the Han Solo adventures that were sort of like mixed together with a little bit of Leia, and it's
Mm.
like that's how you get to Kira. But yeah, those books are so good, and then there are also comic book adaptations of them as well. It's funny because whenever I look up Bollocks and Blue Max, I always get like the like you see the images of them, and like it's very Bollocks looks like one of the droids that's on the Sandcrawler. Um, one of the other protocol droids.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
and not the one that they ended up designing AP5 after, which is also the Imperial one, right? But one of the other ones. But it's not how I imagine Bollocks and Blue Max at all. Like I have like a very sort of like 1950s aesthetic for the two of them, because they're also like sort of mentioned as being like Bollocks is an older droid. So it's like in my brain when I had read those stories, I had sort of pictured them as a little bit more like Bollocks is a little bit more like the robot from Forbidden Planet, that's sort of,
Okay.
or like Lost in Space, like sort of more along those lines. And then we got a design very much like that in the sequel trilogy. I and that character shows up a ton in Resistance. He's my favorite character in Resistance. That little, I can't remember his name right now, but he's kind of got the tube arms. That was
Okay.
kind of how I always imagine. I always imagine Bollocks as kind of like almost like a very like square body, like a very like cuboid body, um, with sort of like a almost like a dome head, and then sort of those types of arms, and then like a chest cavity that opens up, and Bollocks and Blue Max goes in it, and Blue Max was kind of just like a talking TV screen sort of thing.
Mm.
I should draw my version of Bollocks and Blue Max at some point,
Do it. What is
and
stopping you?
just be like, this is what I had in mind when I was reading the book. Like this is what the books sort of imparted to me. But yeah, yeah. So I love those characters. I think everybody should go read those books immediately. I should go read those books immediately.
I really want to do I mean, this is obviously not related, but in terms of reading, because it's funny because I keep saying, okay, I'll do that after this, after I do this, after I do
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
after I do this, because I really want to do Dark Disciple for obvious reasons
yeah.
again quickly, and then I really want to do. I never finished Brotherhood. I got really
Oh
far into
wow.
that,
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
and for I mean, really both for the same reason.
yeah.
Um, and once I'm done with those, I will try to track down a copy of that.
Yeah,
Um,
they did a re-release a year or two ago under the Legends banner that is all
okay,
three
cool,
books in one. I'm
nice.
fairly certain.
One
I'm
like
fairly
omnibus
certain.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
I
All
have
right,
an
yeah,
older
awesome.
omnibus of them, but then I also have individual copies of all of the books
Mm.
from that I don't read. I don't dare open them. They're it just for my collection.
They're
But
sacred.
all right, give me your next one.
All right. I will do. Let's do Delta Squad. It is cheating. It is four of them, but like,
Yeah,
let's be real. It's Leonardo, Donatello,
yeah.
Michelangelo, Raphael as clone troopers, and it's awesome. And it was one of the first real depictions of clone troopers kind of having their own personalities.
Mhm.
Um, because we didn't get that at all in Attack of the Clones. We got Alpha the ARC Trooper, who is really just like super cool guy, right? Like there wasn't much to him. He was really, really buff. Captain Fordo, one of my favorite clone troopers of all time. Not much to him as a character. Just really awesome and fun to watch. Super action hero kind of stuff. And that's what a lot of the clones were until we got Delta Squad, really. So you had Scorch, who unfortunately now is kind of a jerk in Bad Batch canon.
Yeah.
But he was Michelangelo, man. He was always cracking jokes, kind of the heart of the group, very sweet, funny, um, totally lovable, loved blowing stuff up, had a lot of personality. Um, Sev was the My Chemical Romance listening edge lord of the group, sniper, really brooding, tough guy, almost loner but not quite. Really the crosshair of Delta Squad. Fixer, super loyal, super by the book. You know, paint by numbers. Let's get everything done. Do everything the right way. Boy Scout. Yeah, he was almost tech with a little less personality. Um, but like was always the go-to second in command guy. And then of course your boss. Like there wasn't a ton to boss, but it was kind of, I always feel, because he was a first person character and voiced by Tamar Morrison. Um, I kind of always felt like I can kind of project myself onto Boss and be the team leader of this group. So
Mm.
Delta Squad was introduced in 2005. Republic Commando first person shooter game. Really, really awesome and underrated at the time. I think now it's found like it kind of has a cult following, but at the time it was very um, forgettable content that people didn't really pay much attention to. But the people who love that game really love that game. And I'm one of those people. So it was amazing when they were brought back into canon in the Clone Wars, and it kind of saved them from not being canon anymore, because otherwise, obviously Republic Commando has been kind of wiped. Um, but there really hasn't been anything with them since, other than having Scorch as kind of a henchman to the main players in the Bad Batch. But this was a time that, like I said, there really weren't a lot of discernible personalities. And this was also a time before D. Bradley Baker, where you can watch Bad Batch, close your eyes, and you'll know exactly which clone you're hearing. They decided not to do that for this game because it really, their main concern was, well, you're mostly going to be hearing their voices for most of the game. You need to know which squad mate is which. So every single clone trooper was voiced by a different voice actor and
Mm.
had a totally different personality. And the mentality, other than you being able to know exactly who it was, it's also, they kind of made it sound like, well, in universe, this is how clearly distinctive each one of those voices is, and how easy it is for a clone trooper to discern, the different members of their group. So it was definitely, I guess, a wise approach at the time, before they found D, who really did have that kind of versatility in his voice. And I don't know if it's something that Tamora could have handled. Not to smack talk him, but I really think D. Bradley Baker is just kind of lightning in a bottle as a
Yeah.
voice actor in terms of his range. Um,
It's a
but
certain discipline, right? Like,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I mean, this is the thing with D is that like he had the skill from the get go because he was
Sure.
doing it from like day one with rookies, right?
Hmm.
But if you really like chart that, if you really look at it and you sort of watch the development of it over time, um, he built a skill set around playing the clones
Right.
and has really like owned that space and like because the majority of the other stuff that D does is animal voices, right?
Yeah,
He crops up in other
Trandoshans, and
stuff.
yeah,
I like all over Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? As the voices of pretty much every animal that you meet in that series.
I'm pretty
um
sure he also did some ghosts in Extreme Ghostbusters, if I'm remembering correctly.
that sounds accurate. But Tem, like I think he has such a distinctive voice that like that's not it's not the type of actor that he is, right? Of like disappearing into that specific part of it. um so yeah, I agree, it's definitely one of those things where it's like I don't know, I wouldn't say that Dave got lucky. Dave had already worked with D previously on Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is how D got the job, right? But
Mm,
um I mean, he got the job because he was the right guy for the job. But he was in the room because he had that pre-existing relationship, right? And
mm,
had proven himself on that show. So but as Clone Wars has gone on and then obviously into Bad Batch, it's like that because Bad Batch is like above and beyond. Like
yeah,
we will talk. We say it
yeah.
all the time when we're doing Rebel Cells. I forget constantly that
Hmm.
that's one guy doing all of those voices
Hmm.
because Wrecker and Crosshair not the same guy. Tech and Echo not the same guy. Hunter different, right? Like, and then you'll get like Hauser coming in, and you're like, this is a new clone
Yeah.
who is like a clone. But at the same time, it's like Hauser is Hauser. Like that characterization is so clear. And he's really, really nailed that. But
Rex Gregor is
yeah,
perfect. Yeah, I
yeah,
love it.
totally.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Delta Squad is not that, but it
No.
was the first time that they really decided, hey, I
Yeah.
think it would be really cool to it would add a lot more
Yeah.
emotional weight to
But
the
I
story. And
don't yeah, I don't think that D gets to do what he does in the Clone Wars if Delta
yeah,
Squad doesn't establish this
yeah,
template, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
certainly Bad Batch doesn't end up existing in the way that it does.
Hmm.
Because I think like George had his idea of what Bad Batch was and he wanted to have that be in the story because they're characters that he created, right? But then I think that Dave brought a lot of Republic Commando
Hmm.
into those
Oh
characters. We talk
yeah,
about that all the time.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
Bad Batch is the Republic Commando show. It just they just George had another idea. He wanted to do something different from the Republic Commandos. But
Mm.
I mean, like that's why Scorch is in there, right? Like that is specifically like a nod to us fans to go like acknowledgement. These characters
Yeah.
are the Republic Commandos. They're not a one to one for each of those, but
And I
it
know
is
I'm
definitely that
I'm
vibe.
super greedy because I feel like every Bad Batch wish list, anytime we're talking about what we hope to
Yeah,
see, I mean anyone who listens uh knows that my number one pipe dream is that we get all of Delta Squad versus the Bad Batch. Like I just want to see everybody else.
yeah,
Just because we never got the resolution of what's going on with Sev, I just want to know he's around still because that story is no longer canon, right? So it's
yeah,
um, I just want to see more of them. I'm happy that we get Scorch, and it's a bummer to see Scorch the way he is because I don't think he's mischaracterized. I think it really is just a testament to, okay, well, he's one of the bad guys now. He's not that fun-loving,
yeah. It's the chip.
funny guy anymore. He's a
Yeah.
bad guy now. So like he kind of lost that along the way. Um, so yeah, yeah, Delta Squad. I love him. I miss him. Please, please bring him back
Mhm.
just once, one episode, because we're I mean we won't get into it, but there's clearly a big a big event coming where we're
Yeah.
gonna see a lot of clones all involved, and I just want them there. I don't care which side they're on, I just want them there.
1,000%. Okay,
All right,
cool.
you're up.
I'm up. Okay, this one's gonna be quick. This one's gonna be short because
Okay.
we actually talked a lot about these characters in a fairly recent episode when we talked about our favorite comics, and that's Tag and Bink. Again, I'm
Awesome.
cheating. This is two characters as one, but they are not. You couldn't just have a Tag story or a Bink story. They are Tag and Bink. And they make this list because the Tag and Bink comics are one of my favorite EU things. So, and I think that they specifically make the list because like Tag and Bink is impossible to canonize by
Yo,
nature
yeah.
of what it is. It's meant to be glib and satirical, right? Like it's
Mhm.
sort of Spaceballs within Star Wars.
Yeah.
Um, so they'll always be EU characters, even though they did almost make it into Solo. To the extent,
No.
yeah, there's stuff that was shot, dude.
Oh,
I
no
Yeah, and
way.
they got cut out of
Oh,
Solo.
I hate that.
Yeah, I so yeah, and it would have been a thing of like I don't know that they would have called them out as Tag and Bink, but that it was like for
But
if
they
you
would have been
know,
there.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
right? Like this
Oh, come
this white guy
on.
and this black guy, it's
Oh,
like this
man.
is Tag and Bink. Um, they're just such fun characters. And it's a great way for us as fans to like self-insert kind of
Mhm.
into Star Wars. And the comics, the Tag and Bink are Dead comics are so much fun. So I'm gonna like just leave it there because if you want more on that, I talked in a lot more detail on that previous episode. Go back and listen to our episode about our favorite comics,
Yeah.
because I get into it. But I love those characters. They're so much fun.
Yeah, that was my honorable mention. That was the one that I almost picked.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I love that. I love that series. It's so good. They, like you said, self-insert. They always asked the questions that we were asking, right?
Yeah,
So it was very self-aware and fun and
yeah.
so good.
Very much Star Wars, you know, pointing its finger at itself,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay, so I will do, let's see. I'll do HK-47 because I don't have a ton to say about him.
Cool.
Um so I've always appreciated how different, like, droids in Star Wars throughout the original trilogy are not just robots, right? Like C3PO has his personality, R2 has his personality. Even characters like EV-99 have personality in a weird way. Um so I really appreciate every time they announce a droid with a new uh dynamic and personality. And HK-47, I kind of feel like we don't get IG-11 without HK-47 because IG-88 was just this like skinny robot standing around who didn't really do much of anything, doesn't have much of a personality. Like, yeah, we got stuff in the novels later on. Um, but HK-47 is essentially an assassin droid from Knights of the Old Republic. Without going into too much detail, because I don't know if Tina will listen to this episode. I really want her to play Knights of the Old Republic. She still plans on playing it. She was holding out for the remake. We don't know if that's still going to happen or not. But I will say HK-47 has a prior relationship with the main character, you. Uh, you lose your memories, and HK-47's memories were also erased. But what HK-47 comes to eventually learn is that he is very proficient at killing, really enjoys killing in a weird way. Not so much that he is just like a bloodthirsty sociopath. He just really has an appreciation for creative ways to murder people. And his manner of speech is really funny, and he's just one of those characters that every time you kind of check in with him, he just has really funny stuff to say, and it just has this like weird dark humor that he doesn't realize or like mean to be funny, but he just is. He's just like a very dark comic relief throughout that entire story, and his personality is just ridiculous. And at one point he gets this like, if I'm remembering this correctly, he gets this software patch where he is a pacifist for a little while, but
Mhm.
they remove it because like he's not efficient at like being a helpful party member anymore. If I'm remembering this right, it's been a while. And then once it's removed, he's like, "That was horrifying. Please never do anything like that again. Make sure you scan any updates that,
Yeah.
you decide to give me." And I just really loved his personality, and it was so different from anything we had kind of seen before. Maybe I'm like I hadn't been exposed to it, because I know there was also bad guy droids in the droids Dark Horse series.
Yeah.
Um but it's just, I don't know, man. It's just like one of those things in Star Wars where like droids aren't just robots to be had, right? There really is personality to them. There's more to them than just like, yeah, I'm a robot. I can automate this thing for you. It's not a big deal. Like there really is a purpose um to each of these characters. And I don't know. I just loved it. I love it. HK-47 was such like a delight. He was probably my favorite aspect of that entire thing, other than like the big surprise that
Mm-hmm.
is in that game. But
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a direct line, I think, from C3PX to HK-47 to K2SO to IG-11,
yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah,
Like they're all cut very much from the same cloth,
yeah,
and
yeah. K2SO. Yeah, that's a good point. Same
yeah,
kind of just like dry. Tell it like it is. Not trying to be funny, but hilarious because of how blunt and
yeah,
truthful, and doesn't matter how hurtful it might be.
yeah, yeah. They're I'm yeah I HK-47 is the highlight of Knights of the Old Republic as
Yeah,
far as I'm concerned. Like, I do think he is the best thing to have come out of that.
yeah,
And also, like, one of the things that I love about that character is, as a droid, he is a unique design, right?
yeah.
Like, there's a little bit of battle droid in there,
Hmm.
but he's also his own thing. And he doesn't look like a knockoff of C3PO or a knockoff of this or that, right? He's very much his own design. He's very distinct, and it's a good design. So when you see him, it's like, oh, that's HK for sure, right?
Yeah.
Which I appreciate, because a lot of Knights of the Old Republic is very derivative design work,
Hmm.
which is one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I kind of get bored with everybody's like sort of excessive praise of Knights of the Old Republic. Is that like, I'm like, yeah, like, there is good stuff in there, but it is also very like, you know like we were talking
There,
about with Dash Rendar, it's very much, we have Star Wars at home, right?
yeah.
Like
There's
it
literally another Yoda
yeah,
at the head of the Jedi Council, and he talks exactly like Yoda.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Like,
I'm
there's
pretty sure it's
there's
even voiced by Tom Kane too, if I remember correctly.
I
So
think it is. I think it is.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. But HK-47 is the highlight. He
yeah,
stands
he's
out
awesome.
in that series. Cool. Okay, let me jump into my next one.
Do it.
Let's see. Who have I done? I've done those characters. I have two left. So I'm gonna save one for last, because yeah, because he is my number one. But I'm gonna go with Afra. Let's go with Dr. Afra.
Oh,
So
okay.
Afra is a newer character. Obviously, she's a Disney
Sure,
character.
sure.
So technically canon, because they consider all of the Disney stuff to be canon. But she hasn't shown up in any of the live action
She's
or
gonna.
animated stuff. She
She's
has to at
so
some point.
loved, man. Like she's
She
gonna.
Yeah, she has to at some point. I love this character. She is basically like an Indiana Jones in Star Wars, but she hasn't quite had that moment yet, where she turns, good.
Hmm.
Um and I loved her. I love what they did with Afra, because Afra was introduced in the Darth Vader comics.
Hmm.
And what they did in those early Darth Vader comics, this is like, we're going back to like 2014-ish, I think. Um is that Vader put together what is basically a shadow version of the heroes of Star Wars, right? So
Hmm.
that's where Chrysanthemum comes in, who is obviously a shadow version of Chewbacca. I 000, and what's the other one? It's BT something, right?
Yeah. I
The
don't know.
little
I
the little
honestly I don't remember
Astro.
their names. It's been a long
There's
time, but
one
I know
triple
who you
zero
mean
is
though.
yeah
Yeah.
000 is the protocol droid, and then I think it's BT something is the little Astro droid, who are obviously 3PO and R2, and Afra um is the shadow version of Leia and Han mixed together.
Mhm.
Um, so like Vader has his own little crew that he goes around, because the part of that storyline is that the Emperor basically, like, after the failure of the Death Star, demotes Vader, right? And so Vader is in like a competition with oh, the guy in A New Hope that's like uh the power of the Force is insignificant next to, or or don't
Marty?
try. Yeah, is it Mahdi? Yeah, I think it's Mahdi. Yeah, it's one of them. Or is it, is one of them Tag? I can't
I thought
remember.
Marty died on the Death Star. I don't know. I don't remember that.
It's one of them. It's one of the guys from that scene, and he like is basically like Vader. Like Vader fails, and he's like trying to take Vader's place as
Hmm.
Palpatine's right hand.
Hmm.
Um, and by the end of that, you get to a thing where you find out that he's got like a bunch of like artificially created Jedi that Vader ends up fighting, and
Hmm.
there's some really cool stuff in there. But in the course of that, so Vader is kind of not, he doesn't have a lot of resources. He doesn't have the entire empire at his disposal. Um, so he has to get a little bit clever, and ends up sort of recruiting this group. And Afra is the most standout, I think, of those characters. Um, at the time in the comics, I think Chrysanthemum has overshadowed her at this point, but only because he gets to be Boba's Chewbacca. So
Hmm.
that kind of launched him up a little bit higher. But yeah, Afra has a great backstory of like, she basically comes from like this sort of rich family background, but has kind of gone off on her own and forsaken all of it um because she's sort of after adventure. She's seeking out adventure. um but she's very like sarcastic. She's very like witty and wry, uh, but always in over her head, which is very much the Indiana Jones aspect of it, because she's an archaeologist as well, but she's like a space archaeologist.
Hmm.
That's where the doctor part of her name comes from. She is a doctor of space archaeology. But to me, the thing that makes her the most Indiana Jones and not just a space archaeologist is that she is constantly getting herself into more trouble than she can
Right.
handle, and somehow managing to get out of it, which is like, that's if you're doing an Indiana Jones story, that has to be. It's not Indy can't be capable, right? Like you always have to feel like Indiana Jones just barely made it out of that one,
Hmm.
right? It's the what's your plan? I don't know, I'm making this up as I go, right? Like
Yeah.
like that aspect of it is like, I'm gonna go, and we're gonna take the flying wing, and then the dude comes out and he's got to fight this dude 3 times his size, and you're like, there's no way that Indy can beat this guy. He is
Hmm.
actually not capable of beating this guy, but through happenstance and luck gets out of it, and then is like, hey, it's all me, and everybody else around him is like, no, it's not. um and Afra is very much that character when she's
Yeah.
at her best. For example, getting involved with Darth Vader in the first place is like, this is a very bad idea. He will kill you at some point. But she always manages to get out of it by the skin of her teeth. So again, just like Jaxxon, this character is on my list because I would really like to see Afra get the live action treatment. This character deserves, she really honestly deserves her own live action show. And I think that it would be a really cool move for Lucasfilm, because it would be an Asian woman in the lead.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, granted, we do have Sabine on Ahsoka, but I think it would be really cool to I think it'd be really cool to have a Star Wars TV show that actually isn't connected into anything else. And just have her going on adventures sort of from week to week,
Yeah,
uh,
that'd be neat.
and have it be a little bit less connected into the overall stuff. But
I don't know if we're ever gonna get anything Star Wars like that
I don't
ever.
think we will. I don't think we will either. But I would like it. I would like to see it.
Yeah, I'd be down for it. Which is
I
kind
don't.
of what I was expecting, to be honest, when Disney bought Star Wars. I was like, oh, they're gonna do like a bunch of stuff other than what we know
Yeah.
already. They're gonna like really go for it. But so far, it's been a
No.
lot of connective tissue, which I don't have a problem with. But I am
Yeah.
surprised that we're this far in and we still don't have anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, like the High Republic kind of is that, but then
Mm,
has so much connective tissue. Like if you fell behind after the first initial launch release of the High Republic, you were lost.
yeah.
Right? It's like I hear people talk about the High Republic now, and I'm like, they've fit a decade's worth of content into like the last 3 years.
Hmm.
It's ridiculous. It's impossible to keep up with. I mean, it's not impossible. There are people doing it, but it's impossible for me to keep up with it. But
I'm
yeah,
really
Afra,
hoping. I'm hoping Star Wars Outlaws falls into this category though.
yeah, it
Just
could.
like, yeah,
It
let it do
absolutely
its own
could.
thing, man. Like it doesn't have,
Yeah,
like you said before, it doesn't have to be a bigger event of the galaxy. Just make it
yeah,
a big event for the characters. Like,
yeah,
cool,
yeah. Let's
let's
just
go.
play in the galaxy. Like, let's
Yeah.
just play in the galaxy. Yeah, it's a big enough sandbox. Not everything has to be connected to the Skywalker family.
Yeah.
Um, Although like Afra ultimately is, and I don't know because I haven't kept up with the comics with her. Because I know that she has her own ongoing series as well. Um, but I assume that she's like sort of disentangled from Vader at this point.
Mm.
So, you would just sort of tell stories at that point in the story, but because but she was introduced obviously immediately after A New Hope and kind of has to be gone by the time you get to Empire, right?
Mm.
Because if Chrysanthemum and Afra and Triple Zero, like if that whole crew was still around, then why would Vader have contacted Boba Fett and the
Yeah.
bounty hunters,
Right.
right? He would
Yeah.
have just used them. So I don't know. I like I said, I haven't kept up with stuff because of the speed at which all of that stuff comes out. It's like it feels like there's like 12 ongoing Star Wars series at any given time. But it just the quality is not all there. But
Mm.
Afra's got some good stuff. I think I read the first 2 volumes of her solo series, and they were good. That got more into like her backstory with her father and her family and her history. She's a character in Star Wars who has living parents. That makes her unique. Just by virtue of that. Yeah, Afra's great. Okay, what's your second to last?
All right, I'm gonna go with Vilmar Grark, also known as Villy. Are you familiar with this character? Do you
Not
know?
at all. I mean, I
Oh,
might once
dude.
you start talking about him, it might
Okay.
click, but
So
yeah.
he is the Devaronian from the Star Wars Republic comics.
Okay.
I think he was introduced in like a mini series around the time of Phantom Menace came out, where he was working with Sidious. Um, but he's basically this uh bounty hunter dude who is super in it for himself, like always screwing people over just to get paid, super greedy, really funny, always speaks about himself in the third person. Like his way of speaking was really funny. His answers are always really funny. And he basically somehow by accident becomes friends with Quinlan Voss while he's undercover, and ultimately ends up developing a little bit of a conscience and ends up saving his life during Order 66,
Hmm.
and goes on to cover for him because he's involved in the Republic campaign. He's being paid, but he's involved in the Republic campaign on Kashyyyk, and when Quinlan Voss essentially gets away, has his final confrontation with his clone commander. He's able to kill the clone commander. I'm pretty sure Villy helps him. And then there's a bunch of like clone bodies everywhere. So he tells Quinlan, hey, run for it. He could sell him out and doesn't. Um, Tells Quinlan Voss to run for it, burns all the clone trooper bodies. The clones come and basically are like, "Hey, what happened here?" And he's just like, "Oh, I everybody died. So Quinlan Voss is dead. I burned his body because I think he deserves it. I think he deserved you know, a proper burial, burning, funeral thing. And they buy it and they cover because like they know that he's the type of person to screw um somebody like that, like Quinlan Voss, over. So they're like, oh, okay, that checks out. And then he kind of helps him while he's on the run during Order 66, but we don't really see a lot of him after that. But he's just like really entertaining. He's a really entertaining character to read, especially in the Republic series. Um, Anytime he showed up, you knew he was going to be entertaining. He actually had his own story in, I think, issue 3 of Star Wars Tales, which is my favorite comic book series, period. Not just Star Wars, like ever. It's that
Yeah.
anthology series of Star Wars stories that is so fun. And like just every issue was a grab bag of stuff, kind of like Star Wars Visions is. And he has his own story where same kind of thing where he was basically hired, if I remember the story correctly, he was hired to help transport this little girl who is the princess of whatever the planet's hierarchy is, and monarchy rather. And he's hired to get her out of the palace because I think the uncle or somebody is usurping the throne, and the bodyguard is with them, and he double crosses them, but it's really just a ruse to kind of distract the people who are after him. And the bodyguard doesn't trust him the whole time, and the comedy comes from, is he really, whose side is he on? And it's so good. He's such a like fun character to read. I don't know if he's my number 2. He's just the number 2 spot right now because I'm like you said, it's just every week it's a different order of operations in terms of who your favorite is. But he's so awesome. Like if I can't recommend the stuff that he's in enough because he's such a great character to read. There's not much going on there, but he's just really really fun. And yeah, I love him. He's got that toothy scary Deveronian grill that the Deveronian in the Mos Eisley Cantina has when we first see him. It's not the same character, but he's obviously like looks very similar because he's another
Hmm.
red
Yeah.
Deveronian.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's awesome. Super jacked, really good
Hmm.
shot. Like he's awesome. He's great.
Cool. Yeah, I did those comics, like that era of the comics I just like missed out on.
Yeah, they're
Um
awesome.
cool. All right. Well, I get here we go. Here's my
That's
big
it.
one.
Do it.
This is my number 1 on the
Pull the
list.
trigger.
It's Koran Horn.
Mm.
I mean, like Koran is such a great character for a billion reasons, but oh man, I have to remember the title of the book that there's the New Jedi Order one. I mean, everybody's gonna know if you know Koran Horn. The one where like the Athorian home planet gets destroyed, right? It's one. I think it's a two-parter. I think it's, man, all I can think is Dark Nest, and that's not it. Is it Dark Tide? Dark Tide 1 and 2.
I don't know.
Um,
I had not read it.
yeah, I so Koran is I it's funny because I don't really like, I haven't gone back and like, because I just, most of Legends, most of the EU, most of even the current EU, I find so many of the books to just be exhausting. So
Mm.
I know that like he's introduced in I Jedi, right? But but I didn't really get to know him until or maybe he's even introduced in the Rogue Squadron series because he was a Rogue Squadron pilot. But I got to know him during the New Jedi Order, and um, I fell in love with him in those books because he was almost like the counterpoint to Kip Duran, and everybody hates Kip. So, um, and that's one of those characters where it's like, no, we're all right. We're all right to hate Kip Duran. There's a lot of reasons to dislike Kip, because Kip, I think this is the funny thing. Kip Duran is the character that I think everybody like. He is Star Wars manifesting who all of the Luke Skywalker fans would be if they were in Star Wars. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They all, because like Kip is the character that you write if you think you're writing Luke Skywalker. And then Coran Horn, I think, is like the antithesis of that. He is like he's the complete and polar opposite of that. Um, he's by the time that we get to New Jedi Order and that stuff, he's a very wise, very powerful Jedi Knight. But he doesn't have man, the why is the Wikipedia article on Kip or on Coran Horn so short? This doesn't make any sense. This is a stub about a character.
Are you looking at because there's the legends and the canon. You have to
Oh
hit
yeah, it's
tab
on
for
the
legends.
canon tab. I'm
Yeah.
like, where is the rest of this article?
Yeah.
This character has like
Because he is canon now.
what? I'm trying. Maybe I'm on the Legends one. Maybe I need to be on the canon one. But most of his story is not canon, right? So I don't know. It's really interesting. This is not. I'm blaming this on Wikipedia. There we go. Okay, now it's open properly.
Okay.
If it weren't covered in blinking expanding ads, I'd actually be able to like look at this.
Wikipedia is killing me lately.
It's the worst. Yeah, so like in his history, so this is the thing, is that Coran Horn has done everything there is to do in the Star Wars galaxy. He worked for Corsac, so he was a security guard / cop for a while. And then he flew with Rogue Squadron, and then he becomes a Jedi. He becomes a knight, and then like eventually, I think he has a Padawan at some point. But let's see, because he's a Jedi. He becomes a Jedi during like the pre New Jedi Order stuff in iJedi. Um, but then ends up being one of the central characters of the New Jedi Order. And in that time in the New Jedi Order, he was like, to me, he felt very much like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of that era. There's like, and so obviously now everybody sees where I'm connecting these dots. I've connected them. They're connected. Because he has very much that same Obi-Wan quality of like, he's very even keel. He's very logical and methodical when it's necessary, but isn't like soulless or faux autistic as a lot of writers like to create those sort of like crutch characters of like, this character is very detached but super intelligent, and it's like, you're just describing autism without saying autism, but that's fine. And without actually characterizing a character properly, and just being reductive, right? But he is very good at sort of like detective mode stuff, but then also like feeling and emotion. So he isn't able to do telekinesis with the Force. He's like, he has some sort of a block where like he can't do it. He can't connect to the Force in that way, but he does connect to the Force through living things, like more deeply than other Jedi. This is an ability that Ezra ends up having as well, right? That animal affinity thing. It plays out over the course of the New Jedi Order in him obviously connecting with the Ithorians, and then when their homeworld is destroyed by the Yuuzhan Vong, he feels it like really deeply. But that leads him down the path to Zonoma Sekot, and really ultimately, like, Zonoma Sekot is what stops the war, right? It doesn't necessarily win the war. The war just ends because Zonoma Sekot shows up. In conjunction with Boba Fett with his own clone army and all of that. But like Zonoma Sekot and the Yuuzhan Vong and all of that backstory and stuff like that ends up being sort of like the way that all of that culminates in the New Jedi Order. And Koran is the one who like discovers Zonoma Sekot and sort of initiates all of that part of like the end game of the story. And it is because of his very specific connection to the Force, to the living Force. And so I just like when he's written really well, He's he's just he's a very well-rounded character. Again, the polar opposite of Kip Duran. Kip Duran is a very surface, very this is one of those things where everybody hates Kip Duran, right? Like that's like we all agree. Everybody in Star Wars fandom, Kip Duran's the worst. But he's also like he's supposed to be the worst. So actually I kind of love Kip Duran because like that he fulfills the role that he's meant to play. If I were casting the New Jedi Order as like if we were gonna do like the Legends New Jedi Order as a movie series, I would cast Andy Samberg as Kip Duran,
Okay.
and I would have him play it totally straight, right? Like very serious, very dramatic. But you know, like if you did that with Andy Samberg, and I'm not talking about like modern Andy Samberg. I'm talking like you know like early 2000s Andy Samberg.
Okay.
You would hate that character so much. You would hate him so much because you'd be like, I know you want to make a butt joke right now. I know you do. But you're holding back. You're being serious because you think you're a Jedi. You're so serious that you're gonna fall to the dark side and then come back immediately. There's no consequences whatsoever. Anyways, so funny because there are people out there who are like hardcore about this stuff, right? About the expanded universe that know these characters so well. And like, I am saying things that I know from like having read the essential chronology and like Wikipedia entries and stuff like that. I have not read all of these stories. I just know that Kip is the worst. And in the New Jedi Order stuff that I read, it was always like, oh my god, this guy is so obnoxious. And yeah, so I don't know. Like I would actually love to just see the two like those two characters paired together more often and Koran and Kip because they're so like it's like buddy cop dynamic, right? Of like these guys do not get along, but you know, Koran is a good Jedi because he's put in the work. Kip is a good Jedi because of like sheer like aptitude, right? He's just very powerfully connected to the Force, right? He said, "Oh my god, Kip is such a self-insert. He's such a like he's like Kip is a Mary Sue. You guys want to talk about what a Mary Sue actually is because that's what a Mary Sue actually is like a self-insert like and then Kip Duran hangs out with this character and Luke Skywalker tells him he's a good Jedi. Is like it's just Star Wars fans self-inserting into the new Jedi Order. And that post Return of the Jedi era. But anyways, the Jedi Academy stuff. Koran to me works because Kip exists, which is why I have to talk about him so much as a character. Because they're really like almost like two sides of the same coin. And this is back. We're talking about back when every character in the expanded universe was a white guy with brown hair.
Mm-hmm.
They're all the same dude. Because I am pretty sure that you are about to also talk about a white guy with some brown hair.
I sure am.
It's really funny that we've ended on these two characters because these two characters end up being essentially the same dude by the end of the new Jedi Order.
Yeah,
But yours starts in a different place. So
it does. It does. So Kyle Katarn, he is my guy. I am huge on video games. I've probably spent the most time with this character than anything else because of how much time I spent playing, let's say, Dark Forces,
yeah.
Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, Jedi Outcast Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Academy. He's got his own little novel series. He was the first expanded universe figure that I ever bought. It was insane to me. Oh my god, they're making figures that aren't just the movies anymore. We're getting video game characters now. That blew my mind. I could not wait for that figure to come out. It was an agonizing like 6-month wait from the point that I saw his figure in a Toy Fair magazine till actually finding it. And just like there's a lot to him. Like there's a lot to that. Like in Dark Forces, not so much, right? Like he's just Doom guy. Janor's is just your guy in a chair, right? Like there isn't a ton going on in that video game, but I spent so much time playing that video game, so I really was like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's really strong because of all these things that he did, and he doesn't afraid of anything. But then Jedi Knight comes out, and all of a sudden, Kyle has a character arc. And in retrospect, they went back to kind of coincide with the game and released these three. I forget what they're actually called because they're not graphic novels and they're not novels. They're basically the size of a graphic novel, hardcover books of that are a novel, but they also have these really awesome illustrations throughout the whole thing. And there's a trilogy of these books telling the story of Dark Forces all the way through the end of Jedi Knight, and they really give a
Yeah.
lot more depth to not just Kyle, but also Jan. Jan is very similar to Cassian in the sense that, like, yeah, she was in this fight since she was really young.
Hmm.
She was ready to kill Kyle, but basically, the first time that they met, Kyle was a stormtrooper officer. He had the chance to kill Jan and a bunch of other rebels that they found during this like big botched Imperial mission. He felt like this weird force connection between the two of them. He decided to spare them, and that just kind of like set off their story together. And then later on, when she runs into him, she spares him because he spared her, but she feels this like weird connection to the force between them, even though she's not force sensitive. And there's a lot to them. Like she was ready to, she betrays him at one point by spying on him because Mon Mothma doesn't trust him at all because he's ex Imperial. Once he defects because Jarek murders his father and like lies to him about it, and then Kyle jumps ship and joins the rebellion, and it's there's a lot more to him than just guy in video game, get lightsaber, swing real fun. So it really, I don't know what it is that, like, there's still something so charming about watching those really horrible CG cutscenes that don't hold up well at all anymore. Because it was before the prequels, and your understanding of Jedi and like what this Valley of the Jedi thing is, you know, essentially it's this kind of MacGuffin that, oh well, if the bad guys get it, he's going to be a super Jedi, so you have to get it first so that you become the super Jedi. But Kyle doesn't want that power. But in the novel it's actually explained like, yeah, no, it's just the souls of these thousands of dead warriors in this giant war that everybody died and it's trapped in the same place, and it's just this like amplification of the force as a result, that these souls are suffering, the good and the bad are all suffering there. And either the villain is going to take that negative emotion and use it to kind of supercharge himself, or you can come in and be the good guy and free those souls, so that not only do the bad guy not the bad guy doesn't get that power, you are also doing the good deed of saving all of those trapped souls. And then you go on to Jedi Outcast, and the story is even more interesting because Kyle was turning to the dark side. I forgot Mysteries of the Sith, the DLC where Mara Jade you play as Mara Jade, and Kyle actually falls to the dark side, and you have to fight him at the end of that story. So Kyle has his own redemption story arc, and he walks away. Like he turned to the dark side and walked away, and he gave his lightsaber to Luke and said, "I can't do this." But then he goes off, and he and Jan are still doing rebel missions together. And then
Hmm.
another dark Jedi comes in and just like kidnaps Jan, and Kyle knows he can't defeat him, so he has to go back to Luke, and now he has to walk the line between light and dark again and figure it out, even though he's terrified of falling to the dark side, and which is kind of counterproductive because fear leads to anger, blah, 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 the whole spiel. But there's so much to him, and when we see him in the books, that like the new Jedi Order, like there's not much to him, right? Like you said, he's just kind of the same character, and he's just kind of, oh yeah, and Kyle is there too. But the stuff that focuses on Kyle is so awesome. And I remember, I don't know if it's just because those games were first person and they were really the only first person games I was playing at the time, but it really kind of helped me connect to that character, especially in Dark Forces, because he was just a self insert. There's just nothing there. He's
Yeah.
Link, right? Like he
Yeah.
doesn't really speak much. It's just you put yourself in that kind of character, and then he gets all that character development. So for me, I'm just so attached to that character. And like the novels really made me feel for him and feel sorry for him and care about him. I don't know. I feel like I'm just kind of I'm very excited about this character, but like there's probably not that much to him, but because it was imprinted on me at such a young age and such a time that like Star Wars for me was this just like magical thing when I saw the trilogy, and then to learn that there's more Star Wars other than the movies. I'll never forget that feeling of how big the possibilities were, and Kyle was kind of um my gateway drug to all that stuff. So, yeah, Kyle, he's awesome. Chuck
Awesome.
Norris of Star Wars.
Yeah, he is a great character. And he'll eventually make it back into the canon, I'm sure.
I don't
Eventually.
know. I don't know because like he originally stole the Death Star plans, right? Like that's it was much easier in
Yeah.
that very first level of Dark Forces than what happened with Rogue One. But like I feel like they took a lot of the interesting things about him and already kind of put it in Kanan, put it in Cassian and Jyn Erso
Mm,
and all like I feel like we don't need Kyle anymore. Like the purpose that he served in the old canon has already kind of been done better spread through other characters.
yeah.
Um,
There is
but
a lot of
I
Kyle
want him.
Katarn in Kanan. You're right. There's a
Yeah,
lot in Kanan's character.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't. I would love it, but I don't know that he would be the same character anymore.
Hmm.
Kind of
Yeah.
how Book of Boba Fett is not the same Boba Fett character that we were
Yeah.
familiar with. Although
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really didn't like that Boba Fett character, if I'm being totally honest. I never cared about Boba Fett in
Before
old canon.
before Mando.
Yeah,
Like,
before
yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we've talked about that a ton on when we did our Book of Boba Fett
Hmm.
recaps, right? Is
Yeah.
that like that was a character that I just like when I was young, I thought he was the coolest because all I cared about was the way that he looked. And then as I got older, I was like, there's nothing here. Like there's nothing of substance to this
Mm.
character. And everybody who says it's like people who say that they love Batman, and it's like you don't actually love Batman. You love the idea that you have in your head of Batman. And Boba Fett's the same thing, right? And then Book of Boba Fett and Mando like brought this character back and then like recontextualized him and is like I that character I love. It's very
Hmm.
similar to my journey with Darth Maul, right? Where it's like Darth Maul was a character that I was like, this guy is just a look. That's all he is. It's just Ray Park doing some flippy dippies with a double bladed lightsaber. Yeah, that's neat. It's really cool. He looks great, but there's a reason why he dies at the end of Phantom Menace and doesn't come back.
Yeah.
And then George was like, hold on, and brought him back. And I was like, you could go back. You could go back to old episodes of Frontlines and listen to me. And I was probably like, this is dumb. We have Savage Press. I don't know why we need to bring back Darth Maul. I think that this is a bad idea. And then you get to the end of season 5 of Clone Wars, and I'm like, I love this character. And then you get through Rebels, and I'm like, he's Obi-Wan's nemesis, right? Like he is like the two of them are like sort of locked in that eternal battle until they're both gone. And I'm like, it was at that point that I was like, oh man, Sam, what are you doing to me? Darth Maul is number 5 on my top favorite characters, right? Like and he's my favorite villain in Star Wars because of everything that they did throughout all that stuff. So uh yeah, it's never too late for any character. I think like that's the most interesting thing about Star Wars is that Ahsoka was annoying when she was introduced. She is now possibly the best written character in the entire saga.
I don't
Um
disagree. I
us
hated her. I hated that
yeah. Oh,
character.
dude. In that movie, it was like,
Oh,
hey, Sky Guy,
I
R2E. And I'm like, R2
hated
is
her.
already a nickname.
I
You can't
hated her.
nickname a nickname. What are you doing? She was so annoying in that first movie. And then over the course of that series, it was like, Ahsoka's kind of a badass. And then the Clone Wars ended, and it was like, started to become nostalgic. And then when she shows up in Rebels, you're like, oh my God. oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
she's so cool in Rebels. And then her series has just like taken that and just multiplied that to infinity. Like she's so good in the Ahsoka series and everything that she goes through, and all the stuff with Anakin. Like it's so good. So that like that to me, like that is, I don't know. We'll talk about EU characters, and I think that's kind of like the final note on here is that like it is never one. Okay, my honorable mention, which I'll say really quick, the character that I took off and then said Afra instead was Gilad Pellaeon, right? And the
Mm.
reason why is because I'm like, well, he's now been introduced in Mando, and we're going to see a bunch more of him in Mando. He's another great example of like Gilad is not that interesting of a character in the Heir to the Empire stuff, right? He's just sort of there to voice opinions on Thrawn. He's just there to tell us how cool Thrawn is, so that Thrawn doesn't have to say it himself, right? So Peleon's just always like, oh my god, Thrawn is so smart, and it's like, well, I guess he's smart then because Peleon's telling us that. But then once again, during the New Jedi Order, this character was fleshed out so much, and in the midst of utter chaos and the galaxy in flames, he was the sole voice of reason in the Empire, in the Imperial Remnant, that was like, what are we doing? Why are we fighting for the Empire? Like really, like what was it about the Empire? And he was the character that made me go like, oh, not everybody in the Empire was a Nazi, even though they were Nazis. And so it's like, you are definitely guilty by association, but
Mm.
he has a redemption arc in the New Jedi Order where he makes up for the fact that he was a part of all of that, right? By being the guy who's like, I am going to take whoever I can in the remnant with a brain that understands that if we don't work with the New Republic, we are all going to die. And
Mm.
he takes a bunch of Star Destroyers and a bunch of troopers and a bunch of officers and joins the New Republic. And by the end of the New Jedi Order, is one of the heroes of that era, right? Like he's one of the reasons that they survive as long as they do. Um, and has this great arc and becomes this totally like fleshed out, interesting, rounded character that like started in a series of books that I absolutely despise, assisting a character that I hated, right?
Do
And then
you really
Thrawn.
you don't like Heir to the Empire Thrawn?
No, I find Zahn's writing of Thrawn to be very, very exhausting. It's very like there's so much of like, well, I know exactly where Luke Skywalker is going to pop out of hyperspace because I've studied his blah blah blah, and so now I can predict what he's going to do. And it's like, you know where he's going to be because the author is you.
Mm.
That's why you know, right? And it's like that those books never actually explain how Thrawn understands the tactics. They just have these scenes of Peleon and Thrawn playing chess, whatever, space chess or whatever, right?
Mm.
That where like Peleon from his perspective is constantly like, man, he's always 5 steps ahead. And that's it. That's the explanation. It's just like which is fine in other stuff, but in Star Wars, I want my villain. If that's going to be the focus of the villain, I want it. Anytime you have a villain that's like tactically ahead, I have the same problem with the Dark Knight, right? With Joker in the Dark Knight. When you really scrutinize that story, which you shouldn't, just enjoy that movie. It's not worth scrutinizing it. But if you do really break down the Joker in that movie logistically, it's like there's really not very much rhyme or reason to how he knows to be in certain places at certain times and is able to do certain things and get away with certain stuff, other than the fact that the story dictates it,
Mm.
right? So that Batman has a villain that he cannot overcome. That's it. That's the Joker is able to accomplish what he accomplishes in the Dark Knight because he must, for Batman's story to play out the way that Batman's story needs to play out. So it's really just like, it's a lot of contrivance. And Thrawn in that story is very similar. And then so many people like hang their hat on that aspect of Thrawn being the cool part of his character. And it wasn't until he was reintroduced in Rebels and then existed as a character with actual tactics and who like explained what he was thinking, and they wrote that character, like they wrote out step by step how Thrawn was able to dismantle everything that the rebels were doing, right?
Mm.
That made me appreciate that character, right? And then what we've gotten of him in Ahsoka is interesting to me because he's actually that part is still intact, but there's something else there. And I can't put my finger on it yet. And I don't think I'm supposed to be able to because we're not there. We haven't gotten that part of the story yet. So it's like there's like this mysterious aspect to him now of like, because of his connection with Dathomir and the Night Sisters, now that it's like, what's going on with this character? Because he is
Mm.
not the solely logical, tactical mind that he was before. There's some like there's more to it now, right? Which I find like fascinating. I want to know. I want the answers to that question.
Yeah.
The only way that that won't work for me is if they end up not doing that, right? Is if they end up abandoning that part of the story and we don't get an answer to the transformation that he went through on his time, you know, in the other galaxy. But yeah, I really don't like the Heir to the Empire stuff. It's funny because like so many characters come out of that, Mara Jade and Talon Card, and like there's a bunch of great characters that come out of those stories, but the stories themselves are kind of what irk me, right? um I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of that trilogy, and I know that it's heretical to say that, but yeah, yeah, I don't know, it's just not for me. It's just not for me, and like I don't begrudge anybody else, but like for my taste and for what I want, it just doesn't work. But
Well, anyone
yeah.
who's listening, I say it's okay that you don't like it. So nobody give Michael a hard time. All right, everyone? We all agree? Okay, good.
It's funny because
So
nobody ever has, which like because
that's
I've
good.
been griping about Thrawn like forever
Mm.
on podcasts because I've never liked the character, right? And when they were introducing him in Rebels, I talked about it a lot, like a lot, and I. But I think that I've done a good enough job of explaining why it doesn't work for me that like
Mm.
nobody's ever like come at me like you're wrong, you don't.
Yeah, it's fair.
And like I have a couple of friends who like who are like hardcore Thrawn fans, and they've always just been like, okay, you don't like the character, that's fine. Um, yeah, one Cheryl Bell, who I has she been on this podcast? No, she's been on Perfect 10. We did Indiana Jones together. She's a massive indie fan. The only thing that she's a bigger fan of than Indiana Jones, I think, is Thrawn. She loves the character. She is the opposite of me though. She hates what they did to him in Rebels. She because she loves the book version so much.
Mm.
So she looks at the Rebels version and goes like, "This isn't really Thrawn." And it's really funny because we sit on opposite sides of that. We'll talk about it all the time. But yeah, but she's never been like, "You're an idiot and you're wrong." It's always like, "Yeah, okay, I can see how that would not like if that's your perspective on it, how you would not like that character, right?" So, so I don't know. I think I've done a good enough job, or just nobody's listening to the podcast. There's just you know,
A little column A, a little column B.
yeah, nobody cares. Just nobody cares what I have to say about any of it. So, I that's it. We did it. We did a podcast, Joe. And I said we got to keep it to an hour and a half, and here we are at 2 hours. But
Pretty good for us,
yeah,
actually.
yeah. As long as you don't now ask me a question that has
I'm
a
not.
45-minute answer, I will be all right. We'll
I
get out
will
of here.
not be.
Thank you guys for listening, and thank you for everybody supporting us on Patreon that does. Again, I will remind you guys of of our Patreon pledge drive that's going on in the month of February, and all of the bonus content. Um, and I we have to figure out what our bonus content is for Force Perspectives. We've talked about other things. We've talked about Thunderquack, but we haven't talked to Joe, and I need to figure out what we're going to do for our bonus episode for Force Perspectives. If you guys have any ideas or something that you want us to do, that would be great. Bonus content. Let us know. If you just have topics and stuff that you want us to talk about, because we kind of just like throw stuff out there and go, what do you want to talk about? Yeah, and then we just give our terrible opinions on it.
What when do we want to record that by? Whatever we're gonna do.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be out by the end of February, so
Okay.
you know, yeah.
You and I had talked about something earlier today. I don't know if the timing of that one will work out, but I will find out what I can find out.
It would be perfect. It would be perfect.
Yeah,
and let's just keep it cryptic for everybody. It would be really cool
if it happens.
If we could do that,
it's pretty awesome.
And I think that you guys will. It is something that we will do at some point, no matter what. But if we could do it as the bonus content, it would be something that everybody would then feel obligated to give us $5 for. Yeah, it would be good. I don't know. Stay tuned. Social, like, make sure that you're following us on all of our social media. I at Force POV. This is the easiest one because I managed to like get consistent across all of the social media platforms. So I Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's all at Force POV. Follow us, and as soon as we know what that bonus content is, we will announce it, and when it's released, we'll announce it as well. So do that. Go listen to the Thunderquack podcast as well, which is Joe and I will record. We're doing that one next week. And the meat of that episode is going to be us talking about that killer new Ghostbusters trailer. Dude, it's so good. It's so good.
My God.
I save it. That's it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining us, and this month's episode, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to Thunderquack Force Perspectives. Our opening theme is composed for us by Christy Carew. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network.